Dude, are you serious? One Filipino? Asking to move my BMW? Marcus Thompson laughed loudly, shaking the car keys imported in front of his friends. Look at him, bro. She looks like she slept on the street. The premium workshop Elite Motors was busy that Friday afternoon in Los Angeles. Rico Santos, 45, was stopped at the entrance with grease, soaked clothes, and a Philippine accent loaded, asking for an opportunity that everyone considered a bad joke. Please, sir, Richley insisted politely, ignoring the laughter of the three American mechanics. I just need something to eat. I can fix your car that is not working. Tyler, the boss of the workshop, approached, cleaning his hands on the cloth. Listen here, man. This is not the poor soup. BMW 7 Series is not supermarket cart that anyone moves. But Rich had heard the specific engine noise when Marcus tried to turn on the car just. That irregular sound, the failure of acceleration, the characteristic smell that came from the exhaust, all told a story that his trained ears knew better than any manual. Oxygen sensor of cylinder 3 is failing, Rico said calmly, pointing to the hood. That's why she's choking and consumption has increased. The silence that was made in the workshop was broken by a collective laugh. Jake, the youngest mechanic, started filming with his cell phone. Dude, this will give an epic TikTok. Immigrant Filipino diagnosing BMW. Marcus crossed his arms, clearly annoyed. Man, you three couldn't solve it in 2 weeks. And now comes this guy here saying that you know the problem just listening? 2 weeks? Rich frowned at the eyebrows. Didn't you test the oxygen sensors? Of course we tested everything. Tyler lied, knowing that they had actually focused only on the most obvious problems. Rico watched the parked silver BMW, his eyes traveling every detail with a precision that none of them noticed. There was something in his posture, in the way he analyzed the vehicle, which suggested years of experience with machines much more complex than anyone could imagine. If I fix it, Rico said simply, give me a sandwich. Anything. I'm just hungry. The proposal was so absurd that Marcus almost choked. A sandwich? Man, if you really solve what these professionals haven't been able to, I pay you $100. And I film everything, Jake added, still laughing. It will be viral. Filipino Semtedo Aruma BMW that American mechanics have not achieved. Rico just nodded, his hands already moving toward the hood of the car. For a brief moment, when his fingers touched the metal, something changed in his posture. It was no longer the desperate immigrant asking for food. It was someone who knew engines like a conductor knows a symphony. Tyler was about to do another joke when he noticed something strange. The way Rico opened the hood, as his eyes immediately found the right components as his hands moved with a confidence that did not match his torn clothes. Jake, Tyler whispered, stop shooting a second. But Jake was mesmerized by the subtle transformation he witnessed. Rico had taken a key to the bench and started working with precise, almost surgical movements, as if that engine were family territory. Marcus approached, his arrogance giving way to growing curiosity. How did you know where the sensor was without even looking at the manual? Rico did not respond immediately, focused on work. When he finally raised his eyes, there was an intensity in them that made all gifts realize that they might have completely underestimated that man. I worked with engines all my life, he said simply, continuing the repair. What none of them knew was that Rico Santos was not just another Filipino immigrant looking for work. In the Philippines, he had been a legend, national street racing champion, a mechanical engineer, owner of one of Manila's most respected workshops, until a family tragedy brought him to the United States in search of a fresh start that became a devastating fall. While working in silence with all the fixed eyes on him, Rich carried secrets that explained not only their exceptional technical knowledge, but also the unshakable calm of those who had already faced much larger challenges than the contempt of 3 arrogant American mechanics. If this story of prejudice and hidden talent aroused your curiosity, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple request for food would become the most humiliating lesson that men would never receive. 15 minutes later, Rico had removed the defective sensor and installed a new one that his Fernando from the next workshop had loaned, the Ronrono BMW U, as a new, smooth, and powerful machine. This is impossible, Marcus murmured, connecting and turning off the engine over and over. You three were 2 weeks in this shit and does it solve in 15 minutes? Tyler was red with anger and embarrassment. It was luck. Anyone could have thought of the oxygen sensor first. Anyone? Rico asked calmly, cleaning his hands in an old rag. So why didn't you think? Jake kept filming, but now with less fun and more fascination. The video was already getting very different from what he had planned to post. Marcus took $100 note from his wallet, but Rich, he shook his head. We talked about a sandwich. Just that. Dude, you just did what a premium workshop couldn't. I don't need to, Rich insisted. Word is word. Tyler approached, clearly annoyed that he was surpassed by an unqualified immigrant. Okay, you were lucky this time. But any more complex problem you wouldn't solve? More complex like what? Rico asked, genuinely curiously. Like that Porsche there. Tyler pointed to a red sports car at the bottom of the workshop. 3 weeks standing. Motor makes a strange noise, but no one can identify what it is. Not even the dealership technician. Rico walked to Porsche 911, his hands playing the hood lightly. May I take a look at it? Now have you become a Porsche expert too? Jake laughed, but there was less confidence in his voice. Marcus joined the group. Dude, if you solve this too, I give you $500. This Porsche is mine. I bought used and found that there is a problem. Rico opened the hood and immediately frowned. Not for the problem, which he identified in seconds for the characteristic sound, but from what he saw in the engine. Specific modifications, custom adjustments, tools of tools, he knew very well. Where did you buy this car? Rico asked, his voice changing subtly. From a guy in the Philippines. He said he was from some famous pilot there. Why? Rico felt his chest squeeze. That Porsche had been yours. The same one that had piloted on dozens of races in Manila. The same one she had sold for a fraction of the real value when she had to leave everything behind and come to the United States after the tragedy that destroyed her family. The modifications in the injection system, the suspension lowered in a specific way, even a small mark he had made in the engine after a especially important victory. Everything was there, like ghosts of a life he thought he left completely in the past. The problem is at the high-pressure pump, Rico said, forcing his voice to remain firm. It has been modified for running. It needs special fuel and specific maintenance. With ordinary gasoline, it fails after a few hours. Tyler crossed his arms. And how do you know all this? Rich hesitated. How to explain that you knew why you had personally made each of those modifications? What had tested that bomb in more than 50 races? What did you know each screw of that engine because it was he who had built it? I've seen similar modifications. He lied. Marcus turned on the engine, and the irregular sound confirmed exactly what Rich had said. You're right again. How can you diagnose these problems so fast? Rico did not answer, lost in memories that he would rather keep buried. He remembered the night races in Manila, the adrenaline of accelerating narrow streets from the time when he was known as the ghost that appeared nowhere and won impossible races. He also remembered the accident, of the police persecution that went wrong, from the explosion that took his younger sister who had insisted on going along in that fatal race. Rich, Marcus called, taking him out of the dark thoughts. Are you well? I am. He lied again, closing Porsche's hood harder than necessary. Jake kept his cell phone, finally realizing that there was something much deeper happening there. Dude, who are you really? Rico looked at the three men who treated him like garbage, and now watched him with a mixture of reluctant respect and growing curiosity. They had no idea that they were in the presence of someone who had once been considered the best street pilot on the Philippines. I'm someone who has had a different life, Rico said simply, and now you just want a second chance. Tyler was clearly uncomfortable with the turnaround of events. His premium workshop had been overcome twice by a man he had judged as an incompetent. Okay, you understand by car, but that doesn't change the fact that you appeared here asking for food. Where do you work? Where do you live? The question reached Rich as a punch. The truth was that he slept in a shelter for immigrants, survived with work construction and washing dishes in a Filipino restaurant in the early hours. All his experience and knowledge had not been enough to get a decent job in a country that saw his appearance and accent only. Work where they leave me, Rico answered with dignity, and I live where I can. Marcus watched the interaction in silence, clearly bothered by Tyler's behavior. Rich, can I ask you a question? Do you want a job? The silence that was made in the workshop was tense. Tyler opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus cut him off. My company has a fleet of executive cars. We always need good mechanics. And from what I saw here today, you are better than a lot of certified professional I know. Rico felt an emotion he had not experienced for years, hope. But Tyler was not willing to accept that situation. For him, social hierarchy needed to be maintained. No matter how rich he knew, he was still just a Philippine immigrant who didn't deserve to be there. Marcus, are you crazy? Will you hire a guy who don't even know where he came from? What if he steals something? What if it's illegal? The racist accusation was like a slap in the face of all present. Jake looked down, embarrassed. Marcus was visibly annoyed. Rich, however, just smiled sadly. He had heard worse accusations, had faced more cruel prejudices, but each word confirmed something he had been silently planning since he had put his feet in that workshop. Maybe it was time to show those people not just what he knew about engines, but who he really was, and especially what happened when someone completely underestimated a man who had already lost everything once and had nothing more to lose. What Tyler didn't know was that every insult, every look of contempt, was being recorded not only by Jake's cell phone, but by the impeccable memory of someone who had learned to turn humiliation into fuel, into a much more sophisticated revenge than any of them could imagine. The next morning, Rico arrived earlier than normal in Elite Motors, not because he had been hired, Tyler had made it clear that it would never happen, but because he had made a decision at night in the shelter. Marcus was waiting for him in the parking lot, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you would come," he said, extending one of the glasses. "About yesterday, I want to apologize for Tyler's behavior." "No need," Rico answered, accepting the gratefully coffee. "I've heard things worse. Still, it's not right." Marcus watched Rich carefully. "Can I ask you a personal question? How did you learn so much about cars?" Rico hesitated, looking at the workshop where Tyler was already working, clearly annoyed by his presence. "In the Philippines, I had a different experience with cars." Before Marcus could ask more details, Tyler left the workshop carrying a toolbox. "What is this guy doing here again? I thought it was clear yesterday." "Tyler, relax." Marcus tried to soften. "Rich, I have a proposal. I can't give you a job here, it's not my workshop, but I can tell you elsewhere." "Other places?" Tyler laughed with contempt. "Who will hire an illegal immigrant without documents?" Rico felt the blood boil, but kept his voice calm. "I have all the necessary documents. Work visa, social security, all cool." "Of course it has," Tyler kept teasing. "I bet they are all fake, right? You are Philippines are experts in that." It was at this moment that something changed in the air. Rico put the coffee on the floor slowly, his hands moving with a deliberate calm that made Marcus realize that he was about to witness something significant. "Tyler," Rico said, his voice taking a different tone, lower, more controlled, more dangerous. "Can I show you something?" Tyler crossed his arms. "What now? Will you teach me more mechanical tricks?" Rico took his cell phone out of his pocket and opened the YouTube. On the screen appeared a video with over 2 million views. The Ghost wins Manila Underground Championship. A blue Subaru accelerates through narrow streets, dodging impossible obstacles, piloted by someone with superhuman reflexes. "This guy is insane," Jake commented, approaching to see. "Who can drive like this?" Rico increased the volume. The video shows the pilot out of the car after the victory, taking off his helmet and revealing a younger but unmistakably familiar face. The silence that was made was absolute. Marcus took the cell phone, paused the video at the exact moment when the pilot's face is clear, and looked at Rico. "It can't be Rico the Ghost Santos," Rico said simply. "Manila Underground champion for 3 consecutive years, speed record holder in urban circuit in the Philippines." Tyler was gaping. Jake compulsively filmed the reaction of all. "You're a legend," Marcus murmured. "Dude, I saw you run. There are videos of yours on YouTube with millions of views. You're considered one of the best street riders in the world." Rico waved, but there was sadness in his eyes. That was before." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The memories of the accident that took off his sister were still too open. Tyler was trying to process the information. The unqualified immigrant he had humiliated was actually an international celebrity of underground motorsport. "So why are you here?" Tyler asked, his arrogance giving way to genuine curiosity. "Why aren't you running? Why are you asking for workshop work?" Rico kept the cell phone. "Because some races cost more than trophies can pay." Marcus understood that there was a tragic story behind those words, and decided not to press. Instead, he had an idea. "Rich, forget the indication for other workshops. I have a better proposal." He took the Ferrari keys out of the workshop. "My partners are coming here today to see some cars. One of them has a problem with a problem that no one can solve. If you can diagnose and fix in front of them, they will want to hire you on the spot," Jake completed, excited about shooting more viral content. Tyler frowned. That meant that Rich could get a better job than his with more important people. His envy was turning into something more dangerous. "What if he can't solve?" Tyler asked maliciously. "What if it's all right?" Rico looked straight into Tyler's eyes. "If I can't solve, I'm leaving and never back here." "What if you get it?" Marcus asked. Rico smiled, and for the first time since he had reached that country, his eyes shone with the confidence of the champion that had once been. "If I can, you'll find out that underestimating people based on appearance is the most expensive mistake someone can make." Tyler didn't like the challenge tone, but couldn't back down now. "Okay, I accept the bet. But when you fail, I want you to admit in front of everyone who is just a scam." Rico reached out, combined. As they squeezed their hands, Rico noted Tyler carefully. There was something in that man's stance, in the way he looked at the expensive cars, in the envy poorly disguised when he talked to Marcus, who Rich recognized very well. Tyler was not just a prejudiced mechanic. He was someone frustrated with his own mediocrity, someone who used racism to mask his professional insecurity. And people like that always made the same mistake. They thought that humiliating others made them superior. Rico had learned from Manila's tracks that the most dangerous opponents were not the most skilled but the most desperate, and Tyler was clearly desperate to prove something. What Tyler did not know was that Rico had spent years facing pilots who bet their lives in racing. An insecure mechanic trying to sabotage his reputation would be just a warm-up. But Rico also knew that true revenge would not just fix a car, it would be to show everyone, including Marcus's partners, exactly what happened when genuine talent found real opportunity. And when Tyler was time to find out who was really facing, it would be too late for anything beyond regretting having underestimated the wrong man. Tyler's dream McLaren was about to become the stage of his worst humiliation, and Rico Santos, the Manila racing ghost, was finally ready to get out of the shadows again. 2 hours later, a red McLaren P1 parked in front of the Motors Elite. From the car came two men in expensive suits, David Chen, Marcus's majority partner, and Jonathan Rodriguez, owner of one of the largest dealers on the West Coast. "Is this McLaren problem?" Marcus asked, clearly impressed by the $2 million vehicle. "Exactly," David replied, frustrated. "I bought it from a collector in the Philippines. V8 turbo engine, 903 horsepower, but has a defect that no one can identify. McLaren officials said it is inconsistency in power delivery, but cannot solve." Tyler approached, rubbing his hands. That was his chance to shine in front of the bosses and to definitely humiliate. "I can take a look, Mr. Chen. I have experience with high-performance cars." "In fact," Marcus interrupted, "I want you to know someone first. Rich can come here?" Rico approached calmly, his hands still dirty with grease. Jonathan and David exchanged suspicious looks to see their simple appearance. "Gentlemen, this one is Rich Santos. He was able to diagnose and solve problems that our team hadn't achieved for weeks." Tyler laughed, nervous mind. "Marcus, no need to overdo it. There were 2 basic repairs." "Basic?" David frowned. "Marcus told me that you couldn't solve a 7 Series BMW for 2 weeks. The tension in the air was palpable. Tyler realized that his competence was being questioned in front of the true owners of money. Rico approached McLaren, and immediately his heart fired. It wasn't just the model. It was specifically the P1374 chassis, the same McLaren he had piloted at Manila's Underground Championship in 2019. The same car that had been modified under his supervision, with specific adjustments he only knew. "Can I start the engine?" Rico asked David. Of course. When Rico turned on the ignition, the sound that came out of the engine told a story that only he could completely understand. It was not just a mechanical problem. Someone had tried to reverse their original modifications and done it incorrectly. "The electronic management system is configured for the original modifications," Rico said, turning off the engine. "But someone reinstalled factory components without recalling ECU." David gaped. "How do you know about modifications? Documentation did not mention any of this." Rich hesitated. He could not explain that he knew why he had been who had supervised each modification of that specific car. "For the sound of the engine and the throttle response, it is a typical inconsistency of when hardware and software are not synchronized." Tyler was not willing to accept that. Anyone can talk about ECU and modifications. What matters is solving. "You're right," Rico agreed. "Mr. Chen, can I do a quick test to confirm?" David waved positively. Rico connected a scanner to McLaren and sailed the menus with a familiarity that made everyone intrigued. In a few minutes, he found exactly what he was looking for. "Here it is," he showed the scanner screen. "ECU is programmed for high-performance injectors, but the installed are factory, so power delivery is inconsistent." Jonathan approached the screen. "Impressive. How did you know where to look?" "Experience," Rico answered simply. Tyler could no longer contain himself. Seeing Rich being praised by the bosses was destroying his ego. "Okay." He identified the problem, but solving is something else. "Let's see if you can do more than diagnosis." David looked at Tyler with a cold expression. "Sir, Tyler Martinez, head of the mechanics." He performed with pride. "Mr. Martinez, as I understand it, you had 2 weeks with a BMW and couldn't solve. Rico solved in 15 minutes, so you may better watch and learn." Tyler's public humiliation in front of the bosses was brutal. His face turned red with anger and shame. Rico began working at McLaren, reconfiguring ECU with accuracy that mesmerized the observers. His hands moved through the digital menus as if he knew each memory parameter. "Unbelievable," Jonathan murmured to David. "He's recalibrating everything without even consulting manual." What they didn't know was that Rich did not need manual because it was he who had created those specific parameters 3 years ago, when McLaren was still his own. After 30 minutes of intense work, Rico finished reprogramming. "Ready, you can test." David turned on the engine, and the sound that came out was completely different. Soft, powerful, perfect. He stepped on the accelerator and the answer was instantaneous and brutal. My God, he murmured. I've never seen this McLaren walk like this. Rico smiled sadly. Of course, no one had piloted that McLaren with the right settings since he had done it before losing everything and coming to the United States. Jonathan took off his cell phone and started filming. I need to document this. Rich, where did you learn to work with such advanced systems? In the Philippines, Rico answered evasively. Tyler, desperate to recover some credibility, made the error that Rich was waiting. I bet it was in some pirate workshop there. You Philippines are known to make imported car gambiara. The racist comment exploded in the air like a bomb. David and Jonathan were visibly uncomfortable. Marcus closed his face. Rich, however, remained calm. The time had come. Tyler, he said softly, can I show you where I really learned? Before Tyler could answer, Rico took his cell phone and opened a specific video on YouTube. On screen appeared a red McLaren P1, exactly the same in the workshop, accelerating through Manila streets with a superhuman skill. McLaren P1 Underground Championship Manila 2019. Rich the Ghost Santos. He read the title aloud. The silence that was made was absolute. David took the cell phone, compared the video car with his McLaren, and his hand started to shake. It can't be. Is this the same McLaren? Yeah, Rich confirmed. Chassis P1374. It was mine. Jonathan was watching the video, watching Rich that same McLaren with impossible accuracy. Are you the legendary pilot of the Philippines? Era, Rich corrected. Tyler was in complete shock. For 2 days he had treated as garbage someone who was considered one of the best street riders in the world. David looked at Rico with an expression of absolute reverence. Senor Santos, I bought your car. Your victories in this McLaren are legisons. Why are you here? Rico looked at McLaren that one day had been his home, his passion, his identity. Because sometimes we lose everything to gain something more important. Marcus finally understood the size of what he was witnessing. Rich, you're not just an exceptional mechanic, you're a living legend. Tyler, completely humiliated and not knowing where to hide, tried a last desperate card. Okay, he's famous, but that doesn't change the fact that he appeared here asking for food like any. Tyler, David interrupted him, his voice loaded with authority. You are fired. The statement fell like lightning. Tyler was pale. Mr. Chen, you spent 2 days humiliating a man whose talent is 1,000 times superior to yours. Worse, you did it with racist comments that this company does not tolerate. Jonathan turned to Rich. Mr. Santos, would you like to consider a proposal? I have luxury car dealers in 3 states. I need someone with your knowledge to lead my technical department. Marcus added quickly, and I would like to offer you society to expand Elite Motors. Rico looked at Tyler, who was being escorted out by the security guards, completely ruined. Then he looked at McLaren that one day had been his greatest achievement, and now represented his greatest redemption. I accept working with you, he said finally, but with a condition. Anything, David answered immediately. I want to create a training program for young mechanics, regardless of origin or social class. Talent does not know prejudice. The red McLaren P1 groaned gently in the background as if approving the decision. Rico Santos, Manila's ghost, had finally found her new running track, and this time, the victory would be much greater than any trophy he had already won. 6 months after that day that changed everything, Rico Santos was standing in front of a 3,000 square meter complex in Burbank. The gold plate at the entrance shone under the Californian sun. Santos Performance Center, where legends are born. The complex housed 3 distinct operations: a workshop specializing in high-performance cars, a free technical school for needy communities, and an emerging pilot training center, all funded by society with Marcus and millionaire contracts with Jonathan's concessionaires. Rico, Marcus approached carrying a tablet. The third quarter numbers arrived. The workshop earned $2.8 million, and we have 6 months waiting list for service. Rico smiled, observing a group of young Latinos and Asians working on engines under the supervision of experienced mechanics. What about the boys at the technical school? All 50 graduates from the first class got a job. 3 were hired by McLaren herself and 2 by Ferrari. Your reputation is opening doors that these boys have never imagined. David Chen has driven a blue Bugatti Veyron, accompanied by a Netflix filming team. Rich, ready to record the last episode of the documentary? The documentary, The Ghost Returns, had become a global phenomenon, telling the story of Rico from the streets of Manila to becoming one of the most respected mechanics in the United States. The final episode would be recorded at Santos Performance Center, showing how he had turned his second chance into a social empire. Before we start, Rico said to the director, I want to show a special thing. He led them all to a special section of the workshop where his former red McLaren P1 was exposed. the same one he had fixed on that fateful day at Elite Motors. David had insisted on selling her back to Rich for the symbolic price of $1. "This McLaren represents more than a car," Rico explained to the cameras. "It is proof that our identity is not what we lose, but what we choose to build after the loss." The director asked some questions about his journey, but Rico was distracted by a movement in the parking lot. A middle-aged man came down from an old Honda Civic, nervously looking around. It was Tyler Martinez. Rico apologized with the filming team and walked to the parking lot. Tyler was stopped at the entrance, clearly uncomfortable, wearing a jean of Gene mechanic Rich from a neighborhood workshop. "Tyler," Richly greeted calmly. "Rich, Tyler choked on the words. He had lost 30 pounds. It seemed 10 years older, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had lost everything for his own arrogance and prejudice. "I heard you opened this place," Tyler remained with difficulty. "And it has a training program." Rico studied the man who had tried to humiliate him 6 months ago. Tyler had been fired not only from Elite Motors, but blacklisted in the entire industry. No one wanted to hire the mechanic who had treated a living legend like garbage. He now survived making minor repairs in a periphery workshop, gaining 1/10 of what he used to earn. "Do you want to sign up for the program?" Rico asked. Tyler looked down. "I know I don't deserve it. I know how I treated you, but I lost everything. My house, my car, my reputation. My own family no longer talks to me after the video went viral." Rico remembered the video Jake had posted, showing all the racist comments of Tyler and his subsequent humiliation. It had accumulated 50 million views and became a case study about the consequences of prejudice in the workplace. "Tyler," Rico said softly, "the program is for 16 to 25 years of needy communities." Hope in Tyler's eyes has completely faded. "But," Rico continued, "I'm opening a special professional rehab program for experienced mechanics who want to start over." Tyler lifted his eyes incredulously. "It's not charity," Rico clarified. "It's hard work. 6 months of unpaid training, learning not only advanced techniques but especially respect, humility, and how to treat people regardless of their origin. Would you accept me after everything I did?" Rico looked at the red McLaren through the workshop window after returning to Tyler. "Everyone deserves a second chance. The question is whether you are willing to deserve it." Tyler fell to his knees on his asphalt, crying. "Rich, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I was an arrogant and prejudiced idiot. You're 1,000 times the man I will never be." Rico helped Tyler get up. "Get up, man. Dignity is the first thing you will learn here." Marcus approached, having witnessed the whole scene. "Rich, are you sure of that?" "Absolute," Rico answered. "The best revenge is not to destroy those who hurt you, Marcus. It's giving them a chance to become better people." 3 months later, Tyler had become one of the most dedicated students of the rehabilitation program. He worked 12 hours a day, studied at night, and had become an example of how prejudice can be healed through exposure to diversity and genuine humility. Rico was in his office reviewing the plans for expanding Santos Performance Center when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Santos, here is from the White House. The president would like to invite him to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work in social inclusion and community development." Rico hung up the phone and looked out the window to the complex he had created. Dozens of young people of all ethnic groups worked side by side, learning not only mechanics but dignity, respect, and that talent does not know color or social class. Tyler was down there, patiently teaching a group of Latin teenagers like calibrating an engine, treating each one with the respect he had denied Rich on that first day. Jake had become the center's official documentary filmmaker, creating inspirational content that was used in schools across the country to combat prejudice. Marcus had expanded Elite Motors to a national network, always with the principle that competence matters more than appearance. And Rich finally had found something larger than any trophy or individual recognition. He had discovered that the real victory was not to be better than their enemies, but to help them become better people. That night, before going home, Rico stopped in front of the red McLaren P1 one last time. On the sign by the car was written, "Dedicated to all who have already been judged by appearance instead of character. Your stories matters, your dreams are valid, and your revenge will be to live an extraordinary life." Rico Santos had proved that when someone tries to destroy you prejudice, the best answer is not to retaliate with hatred, but to build something so great and positive that it forces even their enemies to recognize their greatness. And so the Filipino who was once humiliated for asking for food in exchange for work became a living proof that the only revenge is worth it is that which transforms not only his own life, but the world around him. McLaren P1, red Ron Rona Shorty at the bottom of the workshop, as if it approved every decision its former owner had taken. Rico Santos, the ghost of Manila, had finally found his definitive running track, the human heart. If this story of transformation and overcoming has inspired you as inspired by those who lived it, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that the best revenge is always that of success built with dignity and purpose.